I'm Andrea. I'm an artist in residence through Levine Cancer Institute in Concord. I hope I'm finding you and your family safe and well.
Okay, now the paint colors I have are white, red, blue, and a little bit of black. I don't have yellow because we're thinking snow in this case. Yellow doesn't always go so well with snow unless you have some light involved. I'm going to try to stay more in the cooler color mentality, very soft, very pastel. So to start, this is probably one of my favorite painting techniques. This goes really well with any medium body paint, which I'm using an acrylic, but even a tempera would work in some ways with this. Acrylic probably would work best. And of course, oil would work completely different. So for this, we're just covering the canvas. And I'm working vertically in portrait style. I'm covering it with a white. Now notice how I am like scooping up a good amount of this and I'm working that in. Now if you have a larger size canvas, I wouldn't cover the entire thing and then get caught up in just that, because by the time you get back to another area for this step, you're going to have some dry spots. So in increments, I'm just going to grab teensy bits of some red as well as blues, and I'm sticking with this. Think about kind of painting a wall using an up and down motion, and you're making judgment calls as you go. Don't overthink it, don't overwork it. Occasionally you're grabbing some more white, occasionally you're grabbing some blue. Again, a little bit goes a long way in this step, and your decisions go as this: oh wow, that's too much blue, I don't like how dark that is, I want it to be a little more subtle. So you grab some more white, and this continues. So this is a wet on wet blending, and I'll just continue with this until I get this kind of like light fleeting and breaking through kind of appearance. And you don't have to dig it in too much, just let it glide. If you get that kind of dry sound, that's just your sign to get some more paint. And I think this is just a great way, I love this wet on wet blending, to get you to warm up physically, get your hand in this motion and this arm and your body and the feel of it, but also just to kind of let yourself get something on the canvas. Let yourself play for a little bit and don't overthink it. The cool part is sometimes you're not thinking about it once you do it long enough. And intuitively you tell yourself, oh, I need to grab a little bit more of this color, a little bit more of that. Now I'm a big fan of purples, without a doubt. So I'm gonna try to get some pinks and blues in there. Now again, this is background. So why on earth would I overdo this or overthink this? But I want it to be light and airy. Fill in those crevices. Now, I could do one of two things once I feel pretty good about that. Again, background, not a huge thing to stress about. I could either jump into the trees right away while it's wet, which is what I'm going to do. Some people like to let it dry. I kind of like the smoothness of while it's wet. You will eventually get some stickiness where it wants to dry. Now I could use that same flat brush there, or I could go to a smaller version, but I do like to use flat brushes, and I'll explain in a second. So now we did this wet on wet blending, and now for the second step, we do get to do a little bit of color mixing. And with the exception of, we can always add in other colors while it's wet, but we're kind of doing a fairly premeditated color. So I want you to imagine this. Imagine your next layer. This was my background here, okay? My next layer, my middle ground, is going to be our trees. And so with that, I want it to be a little bit darker, but I don't want it to be so dark it looks like a silhouette in which it almost has this kind of spooky forest look. I still want it to be subtle and inviting and just very cool and kind of icy looking. So white is still my predominant base here. So I'm gonna scoop over a big amount of white. I'm gonna keep that white in that brush, and I'm gonna game for some purples. So now I'm gonna need a teeny bit of red, a teeny bit of blue, and I'm gonna be mixing something a little darker than what my background is. Now, to guarantee that it's a little bit darker, I might add a hint of black, and I'm talking hint, folks, because we don't want that black to gray it up, nor do we want it to become too heavy of a silhouette. I think that's a little too blue for me, so I'm gonna add a little bit more red. But play with this. You could paint this same scene 7 times, and the goal is every time it should be different. So in the world of blues, violets, that type of thing, if I were to not consider my background, I would still say that that's a light kind of pastel-y, almost periwinkle color. In comparison, it's darker than my background. That's my goal. So now don't overthink this. That's kind of my rule of all my painting techniques. Do not overthink it. But I'm just going to put in, I usually like to do odd numbers of trees. I'm seriously going to keep it simple and just do 3. And rather than do one dead center, I'm going to move one off to the side just a little bit. Now I'm using the fat part of the brush. So that fat part is going up so far. And I want you to think about this as almost like the letter Y. So here's my fat part, and because it's wet, it's gliding very nicely. I'm going to turn my brush sideways. So see how this is my fat part, this is my thin part. And I'm going to about a little over halfway up, turn that and turn it into a Y. These are our tree branch rules. So this is always the fattest one, and it always breaks off into one that's skinnier. So here's your main trunk. It's always going to break off. It's not always 2, maybe it's 3, maybe it's a little bit more. But then even as it gets into the other branches or twigs, you're even going to get smaller branches from that. So you'll notice I didn't take the trunk all the way to the top and then have everything splay. They do have to situate and move before that. Now, I feel like this is blending in a little too much to my background. It might have something to do with my wet paint. I'm okay with that, but I will darken this down a little bit. I'm not going to reinvent the wheel though. I'm not gonna feel like I have to paint over the whole thing, because I might like to see some lightnesses. Might just work out. Now even this one, I might branch off even a little bit more, but it always comes. Notice how I always go back to the branch that it originates in before I do a turn. Imagine you're kind of veering onto an exit off of the interstate. Here's your main interstate, and you're veering off, exiting like so. You don't just take an abrupt turn, but you originate in there. So let them crisscross. Don't overthink this. This is just kind of a cropped in version of a tree. Now I'm not going to put tons more on this one because I want to put a couple more trees. I do want to make sure that these trees branch at different increments so they're not all just happening immediately there. So maybe this one might pull over to the side. And again, play with this. You could always get to something smaller and thinner or a rounder brush. The reason I like this is look how much paint that holds. If I use something like this, yeah, I might get a nice little tip to it, but I'm not getting very far before all my paint runs out, and I end up getting just a little bit more globby and doesn't apply so well. So I'm going to start my Y a little sooner, and now we're going to get to this moving off canvas, which is good. It's cropped. Crisscrossing into each other. It just need to get smaller. Here's the thing, if that's not small enough, I can't undo that. I could, but it'd take a lot of effort. What I'll do is come back to the one it originated from, such as this, and I make that one bigger. And if all of a sudden, well, no, that one's too big, then you go back to the base of that original one, you go back, and that becomes bigger. So just get lost in these trees. Crisscross, but don't get too lost in them. This is our middle ground, right? Okay, now I'm gonna go ahead and put my third. I'm gonna put this one a little closer. Same thing. Paint, this is where you're gonna start to get this like stickier paint because your background wants to dry so badly. And here I am messing with it, but that's okay. We'll just continue to add a little bit more paint onto it. Again, notice how I'm working in these increments. As I've continued to add more paint, you'll see my brush eventually gets really, really big and it holds so much I'm not gonna be able to achieve those smaller branches. So every so often, you'll see me pull that paint back down from this metal part, the ferrule, and try to pull it back to the tips, and or you might just need to go back and give it a good cleaning I always say we tap dance those bristles into the bottom and really pull that paint out of that area. And so it continues, that's a little smoother. My paint has stayed at the ends. And this, I absolutely love this painting for, well, trees in general, because this can be so easily done with all ages, all experiences. So therapeutic in getting lost in these branches and how far you want to take it. It could have 2 branches. It could just be a simple Y that comes off of that main one. It could get to 64 eventually. You can take it as far as you want. There is no right or wrong. That's art for you, folks. Okay, I wanted to bulk that up. Notice I wanted to bulk that up because this one was so big. Not beating myself up about it, just trying to use that as an example for others. And I truly appreciate having all those different lights and darks in it. So my mentality of keeping the background a little bit lighter and having the dark paint streak through is you're going to pick up some lights and darks in there, and just to appreciate those different tonal changes in there and those darks. Now again, I don't want to overcomplicate it. I could intentionally go in and mix in with that same pile, some even darker colors. I could push in a little bit of black, and I could get shadowy if I really wanted to. I don't want it to be straight black, but I could start to play in some shadows and whatnot, but I'm not going to be so concerned with that. You'll see how just streaking it down the side makes a difference here and there, because my bigger play on it is going to be putting the snow in the lighter areas in. So now I'm going back to even lighter. So I have my background, which, by the way, did you notice? Now the whole idea is it looks like a distant forest. You have what looks like kind of light passing through some very distant, vague trees. If I told you that from the beginning, you might have overthought that a little bit, but now you've got this distant light, and now you have your still light, but darker in comparison middle ground. Now we're gonna go back to the foreground, which is gonna be your light. It's gonna be your snow. And this is where I would grant access to like these smaller, rounder brushes or even smaller flat brushes. And so you can take this as far as you would like, just like anything else. But I like to, this was actually kind of recommended by somebody I worked with and was teaching this to once. And they said, why don't we add some globs of snow on there? So we're gonna go around here and there. And notice how I'm putting it on pretty hot and heavy. I want some snowy branches. That first one you do is gonna look really heavy just because the others don't have it. So you don't have to, you could just do it in one little lick. You don't have to do this dabbing motion, but really think about it. What's gonna catch this snow? You know, is it gonna sit in these V's here and there? Do you want it just to be a little icier and it just kind of glide through that snow that's already wet, or excuse me, the tree that's already wet? That's fine too. But just kind of playfully dab at that. Get a little build up here and that. This is totally optional. Maybe you're you just want the trees to be kind of icy, no snow build up on it. But again, just some techniques. So this one's much thicker. I'm not really blending, I'm just applying and dabbing. Thinking about where that would lay. If I wanted to, I could put the occasional streak of white on the side or through one area. Just give them a little icy look. You'll notice I keep going back and getting some fresh white here and there. If this is really wet, being your trees and background still, you're gonna pick up a lot of that color, so your white's not gonna be as intense, so you might occasionally have to clean out your brush too. Just play. And then, last but certainly not least, I put in my snow, and you can go as detailed as you want with it. You can stick with the dots, the speckles. You could actually really intentionally put in a very defined snowflake, meaning like you do your X with your T through it, and you put in your hexagonal like shapes or combinations. Again, this is where it's phenomenal for all ages because you can really imagine a youngster having a great time with the snow. They were just waiting for that snow. Aren't we all? Am I the only one just waiting for the snow? If you prefer a little more pristine snow, you could always use the back end of your brush. You're going to get much more delicate looking drops, but you will get a buildup just from the way the end of your wooden handle kind of pulls up from there. And it continues, you just play. And then you start kind of going, okay, I'll give myself some credit on this one. And next thing you know, you're thinking a little more adventurously and you're saying, I want to put something else in there to jazz it up. Maybe it's a bird, or maybe it is some more definitive tree limbs. You name it, you own it. Go for it. Here's the beauty of these acrylic paints too. Probably why it's my favorite painting medium. I let this dry and I paint right back over it, and you'll never know what's underneath that. I probably have some paintings that have 7 others underneath it. I just think it's kind of like the journey of life, right? There's so many backstories to make up what it is at the time. So these more delicate talking ones or delicate looking snowflakes that I'm referring to would be, imagine, I've got my rounder brush and I really have to get a nice tip for this, but imagine doing one that would be, you notice me keep getting more paint in little increments, so I don't have tons. So I might do like a 3-point star. I say it's truly a 6-point, but it's 3 crossed over, and then this is where your design really starts to become you and unique. You know, do you have dots on the end of it? Didn't clean that up very well. Do you go in and put your little arrow points on it? I mean, every snowflake is different, right? How many different ones can you dream up? Now this is where it can get fun. If you really enjoyed the paint mixing portion when we did the middle ground of the trees, then you could really enjoy doing a variety of other colors. Maybe I try to only, the challenge is only using the colors I have, just like the infinite amount of snowflakes. As far as their design goes, you can also have an infinite amount of colors when it comes to just using these particular ones. And I'm not even going to use black, but maybe there's a hair more white in this, or a touch more pink, you name it. You can alter this so many times. So get some little ones in there. I know I'm doing pinks now, that just seems crazy. But appreciate the design of this. That's where I'm going with this. And by all means, put in your own color choices. But again, find brushes that are appropriate. There's even some fancy kind of paint pens out there that some people might prefer. And even just using a smaller brush is fine for you too. So I hope through the journey of painting this, you reflect on what snow I know does for me. Just puts not only a blanket of white on our physical surround, but it just kind of puts some things in perspective. It puts some quietness to life that helps us be a little bit more open to reflection and to observation, and maybe even setting goals, or maybe just enjoying the present. So I hope you enjoy painting, my friends. And you get lost in a little snow scene of your own. Take care.